Hey, this is Rick, Bike Fitness Coaching again with another video on bearings. We've had quite a stir of activity in the comments discussing, hey, can you get a little bit more detail? I have some more questions. So yeah, we'll get into a little more detail and we'll go through a bearing that actually failed. So a couple things. We have here a 6805 Deep Groove. Deep Groove is an outer ring, an inner ring, and the races are inside here where the balls roll in a channel, in a groove, deep groove. So there's a 6805, 6806, and a 6810. This would be like for the Look Z crank. Again, here's a example of the different sizes. 6805, which would be Shimano. This would be BB30, and this would be the Look Z. Just kind of a comparison there of bearing sizes. Now, with that being said, we talked about one of the other sheep in the room, the black sheep in the room, I guess you could say. If you notice, 6805, 7 millimeters thick. Look at this bearing, 6 millimeters thick. If you remember from last time, what does this bearing for? This bearing is Campagnolo, and this is Shimano. Same size this way, same OD, same ID, but the difference is the thickness. Campy wants you to buy this from them. This is the world standard, industrial standard. You can imagine if you put this one inside a Campy cup, you're going to crush the bottom bracket from both sides and the crank won't turn. And if you notice, they did the same trick Shimano Dura-Ace did. Rubber seal on one side, open on the other. So yes, you will need to put a cup in for the Campy to protect the inside of the bearings from the dirt and debris. I do have some brand new Campy bearings here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. If anybody needs some Campy high quality bearings, let me know. I got them right here for you. Less expensive than Campy. So with that being said, people wanted to ask, what do the cups look like? Well, for example, here's some different examples of some cups. This would be like this would be a press fit for a BB30. You would press fit the bearing into the cup. It goes in this far, as you can see. There's a little channel down here that the bearing sits up against. There's then the cups. Here's the other side of it. These get pressed into the frame. Example here is another type. This is a Praxis. This is for a Cannondale Super High Mod Evo Black bike we were testing. So what they do is to prevent the squeaking, these are press fit. And if you notice, this one is sealed 2RS. There's a rubber seal inside. You can't see this, but the rubber seal outside. This Praxis came stock with a Enduro bearing that was basically 24 millimeter instead of a Shimano standard is 25 millimeter. And then you put this reducing ring, which is a dust cap, dust cover. Bearing is in the cup. This gets pressed into the inner race, and it reduces it from 25 to 24, which is the perfect size for the Shimano crankset. Well, the standard Enduro that comes with this bearing, or this bottom bracket setup, was the 24 millimeter native, so you didn't have the dust cover. The bearings were pretty much garbage, so I had to void the warranty on this. Praxis says if you remove the bearings at all from their bottom brackets, you void the warranty. Well, so I didn't want that junk bearings in there, so I pulled them out. And these are high quality ceramic bearings inside this bottom bracket. It really spins really nice, really smooth. Much better than the stock junk that comes with the standard Praxis. So you basically put the tool cup on, you seal it in, and it sucks the press fit in to the bottom bracket shell, so there's no squeaking on with this type of a setup. It's a good mechanical setup. They just had they just had the wrong bearings in there. So this is very high quality bottom bracket now. With that being said, again, here's some extra cups, that press fit cups, different types of designs. Here's a Shimano. This is another aftermarket here. I do have another good example here of some wheel bearings continuing from last week. Here's a wheel bearing from a bicycle, carbon fiber wheel. Here is a wheel bearing for my old CBR 1000 RR. So there's a wheel bearing, there's a wheel bearing. This is the rear wheel for the CBR, and there's the front wheel bearing. Just different sizes. These also are 2RS. So let's get back to the bearing that failed. So here is the seal on the bearing. So you basically use your little pick the seal off. And what had happened is the ball retainer broke. And this started going inside, and basically the balls, it detonated the balls. To get this out, some of these cups have, if you look at this one real closely here, there's a little groove. So there's a little circlip pin or a ring that goes in to hold the bearing in. So these are really made not to be able to rebuild them. So it had a circlip, plus it also had this outer edge pinned over. So you see, to show you how this thing is put together, I had to pry it off a little bit and wiggle the bearing loose. But there's a bearing seat inside the cup. The bearing gets pressed all the way in here, and we talked about last week, or last time, some of the tools to get the bearings out. So what has happened is the bearing here, there is the part of the ball retainer, and how you fix these things, the bearings. If you look at this side, there's the ball retainer here. You basically just pop this out from one side to the other. There's the ball retainer. Now I believe what happens on these is that the grease inside here is incompatible with this Bakelite material, causing it to become brittle, and then it just cracks apart, and the balls basically just run over this thing, and it just falls completely apart, detonates the bearing, which means that the bearing the inner race can actually come off and jam up inside. So how you rebuild these, if you ever want to completely change the balls on these. So what we do, take the balls and move them all to one side. And then the inner ring will come out. So for example, here are the balls. Steel balls. Here is the inner ring, and here is the race. This would be the deep groove You can see where the balls roll in this channel here. Here's the outer ring with its groove right in here that the balls roll in. So for example, if you wanted to rebuild this bearing, now there's three schools of thought on rebuilding bearings. Number one is you can put the balls in without a ball retainer. There's pluses and minuses. The balls, as they roll around, they're rolling this way, so when they come into contact, they will basically slow down. They'll hit each other. When they're rolling, they're all rolling in one direction. They'll hit each other and cause extra resistance when the balls bump up against each other. Some people believe that you just replace the number of balls in here without a retainer. Other people believe that the retainer itself will take up the space of 1 to 2 extra balls. So you put 1 to 2 extra balls in and build it that way without a retainer. And the third camp is that you just use a different ball retainer, or buy a new one of these that actually is in one piece and put it back together the way it was. Now what's nice about these ball retainers is you can put steel balls or ceramic balls in, and essentially the ball retainer, the balls would go in like here, all the way around. And again, to rebuild this, you would put the balls in and back all on one side. Kind of work the inner race in. It's a little fiddly, but basically it just takes a little bit of practice, but you can kind of run the balls around. It takes several minutes to do that. I'm not going to do it now, but basically you just get the balls rolling around evenly, and then you space them out with your little pick, and you put the ball retainer in and essentially just snap it down, and it's all back together again. So again, it's a little fiddly to get this back together, but it can be done fairly easily with a little bit of patience. But anyway, then you just roll these around, work them around, and then add the ball retainer. So we're getting there. You roll them around the ball retainer. So we talked about this last week too, is that some of the other comments and shows will say, yeah, you pop this off and you put it back in. Well, you see, when you pop them off, you can bend these things quite easily. Now you're causing a lot of extra resistance. So what you do, I always recommend buying new ones, buy new seals. These things get bent up really easily when you take them off. New seals, the seals go on last, they snap on, the bearing itself gets pressed back in the cup back in the bike, and you're good to go. So with that, hopefully that answers some of the questions, a little more detail about the bearings, and we'll see you again in the next video.